Good day, everybody. So, I found a mildly interesting video with William Lane Craig entitled, "What is Hell? Can a Good God be Compatible with Hell?" And I thought of making a critique of it. As a premise, I don't believe in libertarian free will, but I am not going to raise that point for this occasion. That said, let's start with the video I mentioned.
This question, there have been a number of questions about hell. So could you explain to us what hell is and whether a good God is compatible with the reality of hell?
I don't think that hell is what is depicted in medieval paintings of torture racks and pincers and red-hot irons and things of that sort. It seems to me that the essence of hell is what Paul describes in 1 Thessalonians 1:5, where he says, "They shall suffer the punishment of exclusion from the presence of the Lord and from the glory of his might." And I think that is the anguish of hell. It is separation from God, from all that is good and beautiful and lovely, to be left with one's own crabbed and selfish heart forever. And I think that is the essence of what hell is. Now, is this compatible with the goodness of God? I would say that far from being incompatible,
Similar actions, and if less destructive alternatives that would give at least equally positive results are not available. So what about hell? The sinner has already done all the evil he was capable of. He can no longer harm anyone, and the pain that he has inflicted cannot be undone. I also infer that the prevention of any finite amount of pain in this life cannot justify an eternal suffering after death. As long as there was even one person that ended up being damned, no matter how efficient as a deterrent hell could be, I would still perceive it as immoral. We could say that an eternity of happiness might instead justify it, but I'm pretty sure that by Christian tradition a person cannot arise to heaven by simply doing good or avoiding doing evil out of fear of hell. Indeed, it doesn't seem hell was created as a deterrent in the first place, considering how little God has done to make sure its existence became known. At the end of the day, hell really appears as just pointless punishment, and whoever enjoys this retribution is relishing the pointless pain of somebody. It's Lex Talionis at its purest, the desire of watching a person who has directly or indirectly inflicted sufferance to you suffer as well. Translated, it's revenge. Now, you could infer that God isn't actually hurting anyone. These people just punish themselves through their unbelief by willingly rejecting God and depriving themselves of His love. Well, God was the one who set the consequences for rejecting Him, ergo, an infinite existence of immense sufferance. Why engineer such a scenario? Why not simply end the existence of those who are evil at the moment of their physical death? Considering what continuing to exist would entail at that point, I perceive such action as the more ethical. Even manipulating the person's mindset so to make her accept them would be acceptable, compared to letting her rot in an infinite existence of pain. So, given the presence of what I consider infinitely more preferable scenarios God could have chosen, the impression that hell is an act of vengeance stands. Let's continue.
And when you think about that, it is just as difficult a question as how could a loving God send people to hell to ask, how could an all-just God send people to heaven? As a purely intellectual question, that is every bit as difficult. How could a God who is perfect justice send anybody to heaven? And yet people never worry about that, do they? They never ask about that question. But it seems to me that there's a real dilemma here in the nature of God. His absolute goodness, and not goodness, his love and compassion demand reconciliation and forgiveness. And so we ask, how could a loving God send people to hell? But his perfect justice demands punishment for sin rightly deserved. And so we say, how could an all-holy God permit people to go to heaven?
Well, my previous statement about punishment also implies that I would not deny happiness to a person who is now good for past deeds that can't be redeemed. The deterrent justification, although ignored by Craig, has the same problem of hell. It would not be justifiable to deny even just to one person an eternity of bliss to prevent a whichever amount of finite pain. So I don't think this is much of a moral dilemma. To deny heaven to anyone who could benefit from it would be just petty.
And I think the answer is Jesus. At the cross of Christ, the justice and the love of God meet. They meet at the cross. At the cross, we see God's justice as his wrath is poured out upon sin, and Christ bears the penalty for sin that we deserve. But at the cross, we also see the love of God as God himself takes on human flesh and bears the death penalty for sin that his own justice had exacted, so that we should never have to be punished and can go free.
Okay, what Greg just said translates for me in the following. God is angry at us for our evil deeds, but he hesitates to exact revenge upon us. So, instead of trying to overcome his resentment and realize that it is a source of self-inflicted sufferance, he sends an incarnation of himself, knowing it will be sacrificed, and so act as the scapegoat for all the human deeds of which he disapproves. This is convoluted and demanded.
So at the cross we see the unfathomable love of God for us in what Christ suffered and endured for us, and yet we see the perfect holiness and justice of God as the terrible punishment for sin is poured out. And so I think that the love and the justice of God kiss at the cross and are reconciled in Christ's atoning death. So the existence of hell is, in one sense, our only hope, because it shows that we do deal with a just God after all, that we are dealing with a God of perfect goodness and perfect justice, and that sin will be punished, evil will be corrected.
And pointlessly so.
But praise be to God, he is also a God of perfect love and compassion who provides the means of reconciliation with him.
So, in conclusion, what we have just watched is a fine display of a conservative apologist's depraved sense of morality. Thank you for watching.